I need to tell you a story to begin with. So, rewind back to 1986. I'm at home, I'm a teenager, I'm on my own. My parents are away, my brothers are out, and I'm hungry, and I decide I'm going to make a burger for lunch. So, I go to the freezer, I get a couple of burgers out of the freezer, and they're stuck together. So, I get a knife out of the drawer, and I ram that knife in between them, and I'm trying to jiggle them apart, and my hand slips, and this happens. That for Hollywood effects. I stab my hand. Now, when I show this picture in workshops, there are some people that really don't like it staying on the screen, so I'm just going to cover it up like that for now. Hope that helps. So, anyway, I've stabbed my hand, and you need to remember that in 1986 we had the CJD problem going on in England, the mad cow disease issue, where everyone was slightly paranoid about eating anything to do with beef. So here I am, having just stabbed my hand with a beef-stained knife, and I'm thinking, have I just infected myself? Blood is now dripping on the floor at a very rapid rate, and I'm thinking, I need to stop the bleeding. So I'm looking around for plasters. I'm opening drawers, I'm opening the cupboards. I finally find the first aid kit and opening up packets of plasters, trying to find one that's the right size, trying to open one with one hand, trying to stick it on with one hand. It goes wrong, I have to open another one. And finally, I get the plaster on and I've managed to stop the bleeding. So there was blood everywhere, by the way. There was a huge mess that I had made, and I was pleased that my parents weren't there at that point. I had some time to clear up. But the question that I want to ask you is, what progress was I trying to make in that moment? What was going on for me when I stabbed my hand and all of that crazy stuff was going on? What progress was I trying to make? I want to show you a tool now. This is the X-ray, really, of how to break down what just happened. So remember, the context I'm in is I'm at home alone, and this is really important. I'm at home alone and I've cut the palm of my hand quite badly. I need to get to the other side of this experience. So what happened first? Well, first I looked at my hand and I assessed the severity of the cut. That was stage one. Then I was thinking about, how do I find the best way to stop the bleeding? This is the process that I was going through and the progress I was trying to make. Stage three, okay, find those plasters. That's the best way to stop the bleeding. Now I've got to find the right size plaster. Now I've got to open the plaster. Now I've got to apply the plaster. And now I've got to monitor the healing. So that's the range of progress, more or less, that I was trying to make. You can pull this out to many levels of detail, but let's just keep it at those 7 stages for now, because that's good enough for what we need. So trying to make progress in those ways. Now, whenever we do this for any context, when we're looking at any product or service and someone trying to make progress, we realize that generally at every point, users want to make better, faster, more predictable progress at each stage. Not only that, they also want to make better, faster, more predictable progress across all of the stages. So wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to go through these 7, but I could just do it in one hit? So that's showing us in more detail the things I'm trying to get done, the outcomes I'm trying to achieve. And one of the mistakes we can make is to look at that scenario and think, well, the product really only shows up here, 4, 5, and 6. So let's innovate around that part there. But the reality is, if I only think like that, I'm missing 4 out of the 7 stages that I'm trying to make progress in. So I'm only solving part of the problem. And great innovators understand this, and they are looking before, during, and after the use of product and trying to see, are there opportunities for us to extend the value that we bring by bringing new products and services. So if you were a Band-Aid or a plaster manufacturer, probably numbers 4, 5, and 6 would be the areas that you would be interested in. But let's think differently now. What if this was a healthcare tech company? How might they think about this? So a plaster manufacturer, understandably, they've got a plaster factory to maintain. They've employed plaster experts in marketing, in distribution, in sales, and the whole organization is set up to make plasters. So when you present this scenario to a plaster manufacturer, I would strongly suspect, I've seen this in other industries happen, that the answer always has to be a plaster because that's what we make, or something very similar to a plaster. Anything else is going to find it very hard to show up. You can tell that just by going into any store and looking for ways to stop your hand bleeding. Usually the answer is a plaster. But what about a healthcare tech company that doesn't have all of that baggage to carry? How might they think about that? Well, they might think about perhaps there's a box that you put your hand into, and it takes a picture of your hand, it sends an image to your doctor, it'll tell you whether you need stitches or not. Because I didn't know at that point, do I need to go to the hospital with this? There's no one here to ask, so what do I do? It might spray some anesthetic onto my hand to stop the pain, some antiseptic to prevent infection, and maybe spray some kind of rubbery covering to stop the bleeding. And, if you're really clever, spray a little tiny chip in there as well that monitors the healing of infection. So instead of 7 steps, putting my hand into that box for 30 seconds perhaps just makes it 1 step. Now, you might think, well, that's, crazy science fiction. Well, actually, all of that technology already exists in component parts, just no one's put it together yet. And there might be a good reason for that. I'm really speaking hypothetically here, because in the home, that probably is going to be quite an expensive solution, and how often do you really need it? But what about in, say, a Michelin 2-star restaurant, where every minute of chef downtime is a really expensive issue? That kind of solution could make sense. So anyway, that's a way of breaking down in any context the progress that your customers are trying to make. And I'm going to start to unpack it a bit further in a moment with the types of progress, because we can look at this and it feels very simplistic. You can get really sophisticated with this and start to find all kinds of new products and services to sell to customers that's really going to help them in their situation. So let's just move on and look at how this might show up in a real life scenario. So let's imagine you are an Amazon customer. Amazon have realized that people hate being at the checkout. And they're asking the question, how do we increase customer progress at the checkout? How do we help it happen faster? And you look at some of the solutions they've come up with over the years. Their dash buttons, which I think they've now faded out. Echo, buy with one click, Prime. All of these were designed to help the checkout process happen faster, removing friction from the process. So as you go through those different stages, you're looking for friction and flow. What's getting in the way? What accelerates progress? So, Amazon could be asking a range of questions here. At the very top level, it's a broad question. How could we increase the speed of transaction process? That's interesting, but I think it can get better. How could we increase the speed of the transaction process by 50%? If we know that people leave the checkout cart after 2 seconds, 3 seconds or whatever, and you understand that is, if we could reduce that by 50%, it would increase our sales potentially, or checkouts, by another 20%, then we're starting to move into numbers that have more meaning. How could we reduce the number of transaction stages from 5 to 2? If they hate the clicks through this stage and every stage feels like slowing me down in my life, and we bring it down to 2, suddenly that feels like progress. Or how could we remove the need of a transaction process altogether, where it becomes automated, where AI is helping inform the purchase process and it just intelligently knows when we need things? As I said, this is all, quite practical, tangible stuff, but now let's take it to another level. So what's being sold and bought with this image? Because unless this advert is selling yellow coats or hats or gloves, I'm not quite sure what they're selling. Well, of course, we know what they're selling. They're selling cigarettes, but they're not selling cigarettes, are they? They're selling lifestyle. They're selling rugged outdoor male archetype that maybe I want to be more like. And if I smoke a Marlboro Light, somehow I self-identify with what that guy is, what he means, what he stands for. And this is an area that creates massive potential value for every product and service. It's looking beyond the obvious of what I'm trying to get done, and it's now moving into, and how do I want to feel, and who do I want to become, and who do I want to be like? And so there is a very wide range of functional, emotional, and social progress that we can tap into and try and understand, what are our customers trying to do with their lives? And now here is a list that I find very helpful just to put on the table when we're looking at those different stages of customers using products, trying to get through a process, understanding what progress they're trying to make. Put this list in front of you and ask, which of these are showing up? Which of these would our users and customers like more of or less of, or actually they're very happy with the way that it is? So if you go back to the plaster example, At a very practical level, I wanted to stop the bleeding and the pain. But I was also really anxious. I didn't know whether I had infected myself with something. There was a lot of fear, there was a lot of anxiety, and the plaster didn't really do very much to calm those things. But I really wanted to feel some different feelings. And you can look at this, in fashion, in all sorts of environments where the brand matters. I'm trying to identify with a brand or a tribe. These sorts of things start to show up in a really powerful way. And if you work in the business to business space, don't fall into the trap of thinking, well, these things don't matter. I've got a very difficult sales process to go through that's driven by logic and multiple stakeholders. Believe me, this stuff still matters. There are annoyances and frustrations that show up in people's lives that they would love to find solutions to, as well as buying the product or service that they're looking at and having to buy. So please think about using this tool as a means of trying to find out what's really going on for your customer. Where is the pain? Where is the friction in them trying to get from A to B faster and in a happier way? So this all really boils down to a couple of statements. The first is, people don't really buy products. They buy better progress in a specific context. People don't buy products. Well, of course they do buy products, but they're only buying products because they help them make better progress. What's the progress? That's the thing to focus on. Just focusing on the product takes us into dangerous territory because we stop looking at the future. Second statement then is, great innovators make great products, but really they're interested in making great users. This is really about helping people upgrade their lives through products that deliver better progress, the best progress available in the markets, and making that the focus of future product development. Okay, I'm going to wind that back in at the end as well with one final idea that we're going to move on to and look at next, which is predicting the future more accurately.